2 years after Romancing SaGa was released, Square capitalized on its success by releasing its sequel, Romancing SaGa 2, in December of 1993. It represented a big step forward for the series in several ways, especially graphically. Even so, the title retained many of the same elements that made the first Romancing SaGa game stand out in the Super Famicom's early period. Of course, Romancing SaGa 2 wasn't released to a North American audience on the SNES, so it truly lurked in the shadows of RPG history for decades. Over the years, various teams produced incomplete English translation patches, but the game was never fully translated. Unfortunately, this caused Romancing SaGa 2 to become forgotten by most Western enthusiasts. That was, however, until Square Enix remastered the game in 2017 and released it on several modern platforms, including Steam, Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One. The new version uses classic sprites, but improves the environments to fit the widescreen view, revamps the menus, incorporates a brand new English script, completely remasters the original soundtrack, and even adds some animated enemies. All the main storyline and character details remain totally intact. Let me just make one thing clear right here. I was extremely critical of the Minstrel Song re-release of the original Romancing SaGa game, but believe me when I say that the Romancing SaGa 2 remaster is exceptionally good. It's the definitive way to enjoy the game now, and it doesn't revolutionize the title to such an extent that old school retro fanatics like me would be alienated. The classic feel is still here. Combat in Romancing SaGa 2 works a lot like it does in the original Romancing SaGa game. You can choose to attack or use a host of abilities against enemies each turn, and your HP and MP are refilled after each battle. The damage you deal and take is greatly influenced by the formations of your characters, which are preset in this one, but there are still 3 rows. You start with only one formation, but gain more as the game goes along. Formations can help you protect weaker members and amplify the damage of the high damage dealers. It still uses the stat-based advancement system rather than traditional leveling, and players learn new skills through the Glimmer system. This means that you have a chance of learning new abilities in each battle, and the chance of this is increased if you are facing tougher enemies and if you have only a small number of abilities already. You'll know right away when a new ability has been learned in this way because you see a light bulb appear over your character's head, followed by the first use of the new technique. I noticed that I learned many new abilities during boss fights, presumably because they're more difficult. The system is random to some extent, but it's always fun to learn something new out of the blue. The story for Romancing SaGa 2 begins as a tale by the unofficial series mascot, Howlon, a bard in a tavern. As he strums his harp, he recounts that the land of Avalon was once a small country fraught with war and conflict. The first emperor, Leon, had 2 sons, Victor the Brave and Gerard the Kind. As he starts to explain that Leon took Gerard to hunt one day in an evil quarry, the game's events actually begin. The main idea here is that the story narrative takes place over a series of generations. The focal point of the tale is the legend of the 7 Heroes, a group that once rose to banish a great evil long ago, but vanished without a trace afterward. At one point the entire world sang their praises, but with the passage of time, they become totally forgotten. In Romancing SaGa 2, the 7 heroes return to the land, turn into demons, and terrorize the world. As the Emperor of Avalon, it's up to you to put a stop to them. Of course, it's a SaGa game, so the narrative is pretty loose and you have freedom to explore the world, recruit companions, and complete objectives in a very open-ended order. At several junctures, you're also presented with key decisions that do alter specific parts of the game. Even though Romancing SaGa 2's combat system is similar to its predecessor, several other mechanics weren't. For instance, this one uses an innovation called the inheritance system. This means that during the course of the game, the player controls several different protagonists in succession, starting with the first Emperor of Avalon, Leon. If your entire party is defeated in battle, a long period of time has passed, or Leon's hit points are reduced to 0, the current Emperor will be replaced with a new one in a defined line. While it seems like this would make a big difference on the story, it really doesn't very much other than cosmetic differences between the old and new rulers. You also lose the rest of your party, but you're easily able to recruit new companions in each generation with comparable stats anyway. It's all based on an invisible meter that fills up as you play. It is kind of wacky too that you don't even obtain the character you name at the very beginning of the game until way later in the story, as he becomes the final emperor. By the time you get him though, you'll probably forget you even named anyone specially. Unlike the first Romancing Saga game, skills aren't directly tied to weapons in this one, so you never have to stress upgrading to a new weapon and losing all of your existing abilities. And if you ask me, this was the best change over the original. It makes it so much more enjoyable to mix and match weapons and abilities without worrying about sacrificing too much. Also, your currency is called crowns, but you don't gain them directly from battle. The number in your treasury is tied to the quests you've completed and the number of battles you've won in the game. You can only carry up to 10,000 crowns at a time for personal use though, and that is a bit odd. But the crowns in your treasury can be used to upgrade your castle to open up new quests and NPCs, which is pretty cool. It reminds me a bit of the castle building you do in the Suikoden games. Kenji Ito produced the soundtrack for Romancing Saga 2, just like the previous game, and I think it sounds great. It's packed with both uplifting and somber tracks and will be familiar to you if you know his other work. The re-released version of the soundtrack is especially awesome and really deserves some praise. These tracks were reworked in masterful fashion and breathed new life into the music. Battle of the Emperor and Encounter with the Seven Heroes are both great songs, but the main theme is probably my absolute favorite. That's the sound most people associate with the Romancing Saga games after all. I would say my gripes with Romancing Saga 2 pretty much match the ones I had with the original. I loved how you could avoid some enemy encounters, but there's just so many enemies packed into various areas that fighting your way through dungeons becomes a real tedious nightmare at times. Parts of this game are also beyond punishing unless you're adequately stat boosted. It's pretty unforgiving and the game really makes you grind. Also, some of the magic spells are just ridiculously overpowered and make the weapon abilities look like a joke. There could have been a lot more balance that went into this. All in all though, Romancing Saga 2 is a really fun RPG, and it was made so much better through the modern remake. Its combat system and abilities are fun to use, and the title is filled with enjoyable fantasy lore and other elements that made the series so unique. The inheritance system was a good idea that made you feel as if you were controlling a kingdom rather than specific characters, but I guess it did have some shortcomings too. The remake also adds a challenging new bonus dungeon and several new classes. There's also a New Game Plus feature, which is really nice. So yeah, I think Romancing Saga 2 is absolutely worth picking up from Steam for retro RPG fans. I've noticed that it commonly goes on sale there for over 50% off, and it's already at a reasonable price, so definitely keep a lookout for those bargains. So what did you think about Romancing Saga 2? Was it as good as Square's other RPG remakes? Let me know in a comment below. Please like, subscribe, and click the bell below for more retro gaming content. If you want early access to the videos I produce and other perks, please consider supporting the channel by becoming a Patreon patron or via the YouTube Join feature.